I, Bryony Coleman, in my 72 years, never thought I'd be sitting on the edge of my bed holding a check for $170,000. Sunday morning dragged on slowly, a light drizzle outside the window of my Tuskegee home, and I couldn't decide to pack the damn piece of paper. It was 1:30, soon to go to Indigo's for lunch. My daughter is in her third year living with Kaysen in a rented apartment on the outskirts of town, complaining about the leaky roof and thin walls. They dream of owning their own house, but they can't afford a down payment. Kaysen works as a manager at a car dealership. Indigo helps a veterinarian at a clinic. The paycheck is enough to live on, but not much more. The bank check looked so ordinary, a white rectangle with blue bank symbols and numbers printed in a clear font. But for me, it was the result of nearly 40 years of saving money. 40 years of giving up everything that could bring me pleasure. Every month on a bookkeeper's salary at the city hospital, I set aside $200, $300, and sometimes $500. I remember how, in the 92nd year, when Indigo was still a teenager and dreamed of going to Europe with her class, I was almost tempted to spend my savings on her dream. But I resisted. I told myself it was for her future, for her family. And now that future had arrived. I got out of bed and walked to the window. The rain was getting heavier, drops dripping down the glass in winding paths. Chester, the neighbor's cat, sat under the awning of the porch across the street and watched me with his green eyes. He's a clever creature. He knows where to wait out the weather. The house was silent, broken only by the ticking of the old clock in the living room and the sound of the rain. Since my retirement 5 years ago, I've grown accustomed to this silence, even grown to love it. No one rushes me, no one demands reports. No one asks me to urgently recalculate the figures in another medical certificate. But today, the silence was pressing. Maybe because the decision I was about to make would change everything. Not just Indigo's life with Kaysen, but my own. After today, I would no longer be the woman who saved every dime. I'll be the one who gives. Walking into the kitchen, I put the kettle on and pulled a jar of cookies out of the cabinet. Homemade oatmeal, baked last night especially for today's lunch. Indigo had loved my cookies since she was a kid, and Kaysen always took 2 of each, even though he said he was watching his figure. While the water was boiling, I thought about the relationship with my son-in-law. 8 years ago, when Indigo first brought him home, Kaysen seemed like a nice young man, polite, well-groomed, with good manners. He said all the right things, that he loved my daughter, that he wanted to start a family, that he respected family traditions. But over time, I started to notice little things. The way he puckers his lips when I offer to help. The way he looks away when I talk about something from my past. How patiently, but without warmth, he listens to my advice on running a household or planning a budget. Kaysen was never rude, never said an extra word. But I sensed he saw me as a nuisance in their lives. An old woman who calls too often, gives too much advice, takes too much obsessive an interest in their affairs. Pouring boiling water over the chamomile tea bag, I sat down at the kitchen table and picked up the check again. $170,000. To some, that's chump change, but to me, it's a lifetime of savings. I remember every refusal to buy, every unused opportunity to spend money on myself. Like in '97, when the washing machine broke and I spent 2 weeks doing laundry by hand until I found a used model for half the price. Or like in 2003, when my friends called me to go on a cruise to the Bahamas, and I lied that I couldn't get off work, even though I had a vacation saved up. And in 2008, when the doctors found a suspicious spot on the X-ray and advised additional examination in a private clinic, I refused because insurance did not cover all the costs. Thank God the stain turned out to be harmless, but then I was tormented by the unknown for 3 months. All those waivers, all those compromises were for one purpose: to secure the future of my only daughter. I had no sons, no other heirs. Only Indigo, my child, who was born when I was 31, after 5 years of a fruitless marriage to her father. Robert left us when Indigo turned 3. He said he wasn't ready for responsibility, that family life was suffocating him. He paid child support faithfully for the first 2 years, then moved to California and disappeared from our lives forever. Indigo doesn't even remember his face. I raised my daughter alone, working a part-time job so we didn't need anything. But most importantly, I saved. For her education, for her wedding, for her future children, for the house she dreams of. After finishing my tea, I got up and headed to the closet to get a box. An old shoebox of white sneakers lay on the top shelf between cans of canned goods and stacks of toilet paper. It had once contained sneakers for morning walks, the only expensive purchase I'd allowed myself since retiring. I thought I'd take care of my health by walking in the park every morning, but the walks only lasted 6 months. The sole cracked, and instead of buying a new pair, I decided that ordinary walking shoes would be enough. I threw the sneakers away, but kept the box. It might come in handy. The cardboard had darkened from time and dust, and the label with the brand name was partially peeled off. I carefully took the box off the shelf and carried it into the living room. I placed it on the coffee table next to a vase of wilting chrysanthemums, the remnants of a bouquet I'd bought a week ago for my neighbor's birthday. Opening the box, I smelled the faint odor of old leather and rubber. At the bottom was a piece of blue fabric, the remnant of a label. I removed it and carefully placed the check inside, wrapped in white printer paper. I poured some absorbent cotton from an old couch cushion on top. Let it not rattle when shaking. As I wrapped the gift, I imagined how Indigo and Kaysen would react. My daughter would probably cry with surprise and happiness. She'd always been emotional. Even as a child, she could burst into tears of joy at the sight of a new dress or toy. And a gift like this is sure to make her cry. It's more difficult with Kaysen. He's a reserved man, not used to showing emotion. But this check should impress him. $170,000 is more than he makes in 3 years. Enough not only for a down payment, but to furnish a new home. Maybe after this gift, he'll finally realize that I'm not a cheapskate or selfish, that all these years I have been saving money not for myself, but for their family, that I only want what's good for them and I'm willing to share everything I have. I closed the box and wrapped it with the brown wrapping paper I use for Christmas gifts. The paper was plain without pictures and patterns. I bought it last year at a sale after the holidays. I didn't make a bow. It's too festive for an ordinary Sunday lunch. Let it look like an ordinary parcel or a box with homemade preparations. The finished package turned out to be quite weighty. Not from the money, of course, but from the box itself and the packing materials. I set it on the table and took a few steps away, assessing the result. It looked inconspicuous. No one would guess that inside lay a document that could change their life. Glancing at my watch, I realized it was time to pack. It was 15 minutes before I had to leave, and I hadn't changed my clothes or makeup yet. At 72, I still care about my appearance. It was one of the few things I spared no expense. I went into the bedroom, opened the closet, and chose a dark blue suit with a jacket. Strict, but elegant, just what I needed for a family dinner. After I changed, I went to the dressing table and applied light makeup. Foundation, a little blush, pink lipstick. The mirror reflected a woman who looked her age, but well-groomed and dignified. Back in the living room, I grabbed my purse, car keys, and jewelry box. In the hallway, I put on dark shoes with a low heel, comfortable for driving. The rain outside the window had almost stopped, with only occasional large drops falling from the roof. When I left the house, I locked the door and walked quickly to the garage. My old sedan had served me well for 9 years. A reliable, economical car without frills. One more year and I could think about replacing it, but that's later. Now the main thing is to deliver the gift to the addressees. Carefully placing the box on the passenger seat, I started the engine and slowly drove out into the street. My house was in a quiet neighborhood in Old Tuskegee, where most of the neighbors were retirees like me. No one was in a hurry to get anywhere here. Dogs walked without leashes, and children played in the streets until late in the evening. As I drove past Mrs. Patterson's house, I waved to her. She was watering the flowers on the porch despite the recent rain. A nice woman. We've been friends for 20 years, ever since she moved here after her husband died. Sometimes she visits me for tea, sometimes I visit her. We discuss the news, complain about our health, share recipes. It was Mrs. Patterson who once told me I was spending too much on indigo and casein. She didn't mean money, but emotion. Bryony, she said, the kids should have a life of their own, and you're all worried about them like they're little kids. Maybe she was right, but could one stop being a mother? Turning onto the main road, I picked up speed. It was a 20-minute drive across town to Indigo's house. On the way, I passed the hospital where I'd worked for almost 40 years. The old brick building had been in need of repair for a long time, but the city budget didn't have the money. I heard that after I was fired, no one took my position. They decided to save money on staff. I can't say that I miss my job. On the contrary, I am glad that I no longer have to get up early every day, get across town, and sit over numbers until evening. But sometimes I lack communication with my colleagues, the feeling of being needed, the feeling that you are doing an important job. In retirement, time stretches differently, slower and faster at the same time. The days are similar to one another, but the months fly by unnoticed. The highlights are trips to the supermarket, doctor's appointments, and Sunday lunches at Indigo's. As I parked outside their house on Main Street, I turned off the engine and sat for a few seconds, staring at the modest one-story structure with peeling paint on the porch. The house was in obvious need of repair. The roof leaked, the steps creaked, the windows needed replacing. But the rent was reasonable, and in this day and age, that's all that matters. Taking the box, I got out of the car and headed for the front door. My heart was beating faster than usual with excitement and anticipation. In a few minutes, I would change my daughter's life, and maybe our relationship would finally be what it should be between mother and child. I rang the doorbell and heard familiar footsteps on the wooden floor. The door opened and Indigo appeared before me, my 45-year-old daughter, still beautiful despite the tiredness in her eyes and the first wrinkles around them. She was dressed in a simple gray t-shirt and jeans, her hair gathered in a careless ponytail. "Mom, hi." She hugged me, and I could smell the familiar scent of her perfume, the same perfume I'd given her for her birthday 3 years ago. "Come in quickly. It's so damp outside." I crossed the threshold and found myself in the small living room, which was always a bit chaotic. There were medical journals on the coffee table mixed with auto parts catalogs and throw pillows on the couch. In the corner was a basket of unwashed laundry that Indigo apparently hadn't had time to put away. "And what's this?" My daughter nodded at the box in my hands. "I'll show you later," I said, trying to keep the intrigue alive. "Where's Kason?" "In the kitchen. He decided to make his signature steak tonight." Indigo smiled, but I noticed a slight strain in her voice. "You know how he feels about cooking on Sundays?" Yes, I did. Kason considered Sunday cooking his manly ritual, his way of showing he was the man of the house. But he never washed the dishes afterward. It was still a woman's job. We walked into the kitchen, and I saw my son-in-law at the stove. Kason was a man of medium height, with neatly trimmed hair and a well-groomed beard. In his 48 years, he looked after his figure, went to the gym regularly, and took pride in his appearance. He was now wearing a black t-shirt that emphasized his toned arms. "Oh, Brioni!" He turned around and smiled broadly, but the smile didn't touch his eyes. "How are you doing? How is your health? Not sick in this rainy weather?" "I'm fine, thanks," I replied, putting the box on the kitchen table. "How are you guys doing?" Not complaining, Kaysen flipped the steak in the pan, and there was an appetizing rustle. Working, living. Right, Indigo, honey. My daughter nodded, pouring me a glass of water. I noticed her glance quickly at her husband, as if seeking approval. That had always alarmed me as a child and young adult. Indigo had been an independent girl, not afraid to speak her mind. And now I was constantly looking over my shoulder at Kaysen's reaction. Sit down, Mom. My daughter pointed to a chair by the table. We'll set the table. I sat down and looked around. The kitchen was small, old-fashioned, with peeling cabinets and linoleum that had long since lost its original color. The refrigerator was humming too loudly, and the faucet was dripping from time to time, probably because the gasket had worn out. How's work going? I asked Indigo, who was taking plates out of the cupboard. Fine, she said without turning around. Last week they brought us a kitten with a broken leg. It was so tiny, gray. Doctor, Milner said if they hadn't brought it in time, they would have had to amputate it. What about him now? I was really curious. As a child, Indigo had dreamed of becoming a veterinarian, and although she'd only become an assistant, she was always enthusiastic about her charges. He has recovered. His paw has healed well. The owners took him away last week. Her daughter smiled sincerely. He was so funny, always trying to play despite the cast. Meanwhile, Kaysen finished with the meat and started on the side dish of fried potatoes and onions. He moved confidently, clearly proud of his culinary skills. From time to time, he glanced in our direction, as if checking to see if I was impressed by his cooking. I have a new sales manager at work, he said, stirring the potatoes. Young guy, ambitious, sold 3 cars in 2 days last week. If he keeps this up, he'll soon overtake me. Don't be silly. Indigo put a salad bowl of sliced tomatoes and cucumbers on the table. All the customers respect you. Doctor, Campbell came to you specifically for a new car. That's because I know how to approach people. Kaysen turned to us, holding a frying pan. I understand what a person needs, and I can offer exactly what fits their budget and requirements. He was obviously waiting for my reaction, some kind of compliment or expression of admiration. I nodded and said, "That's an important skill in any job." Right. Kaysen moved the meat to the platter. By the way, Bryony, how's your car? Isn't it time to consider a replacement? We have a great trade-in program for older buyers right now. The words older buyers stung. Though technically he was right at 72, I did fall into that category. But for some reason, it sounded especially unpleasant coming from Kaysen. My car is still running fine, I said with restraint. I don't plan to change it yet. Well, suit yourself, he shrugged. It's just that older cars need more repairs, and parts are getting more expensive. Indigo was setting the table, arranging the plates and cutlery. Her movements were quick, a little nervous. I noticed her glance several times at the box I had brought. Mom, what's in the box? She couldn't take it anymore. Did you bake something? No, it's not food, I answered cryptically. I'll show you later. We sat down at the table, and Kaysen ceremoniously placed the meat and potatoes on plates. The smell was really appetizing. No matter what I said, he could cook. The usual Sunday dinner table conversation began. You know, an old college buddy of mine came to visit me last week, Kaysen said, cutting off a piece of steak. He works in Atlanta now, in real estate. He says the market there is crazy, prices going up every month. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I asked. Good for sellers, not so good for buyers, my son-in-law replied. But in general, this is an indicator that the economy is developing. People are willing to invest in real estate, so there is confidence in the future. Indigo listened, nodding occasionally, but I could see that her mind was on something else. From time to time, she glanced at my box, which stood on the edge of the table. How are you doing with that German shepherd? I asked my daughter. You told me about her last week. Ah, Bella. Indigo's face brightened up. The surgery went well. She's recovering now. Her owners call every day, asking about her condition. You can tell they love her very much. I'd love any dog for $5,000, Kaysen said with a chuckle. It's not about the money, Indigo said. These people got Bella as a puppy, and she's been with them for 3 years. She's not just an animal to them. She's family. I see. Kaysen shrugged. But still, $5,000 is a lot of money. You could buy a lot of useful things with that money. Like what? There was a slight irritation in his daughter's voice. I don't know, Kaysen thought. Furniture for the house, appliances, or a down payment on a place of my own. At the mention of their own place, Indigo fell silent. It was a sore subject for them. They'd been dreaming of buying a house for years, but they'd never been able to save up enough money. Speaking of a house, Kaysen continued, I saw an ad for a nice little house on Cherry Street last week. 2 stories, 3 bedrooms, big lot, asking $180,000. That's a lot, Indigo sighed. With our income, the bank will give us a loan for $150,000 at the most, and the down payment needs at least $30,000. So we have to save more, Kaysen said, or look for additional sources of income. As I listened to them talk, I could feel the excitement building inside me. They were talking about exactly what I'd been saving for all these years. $170,000 in my box would solve all their problems at once. Are you seriously considering the purchase? I asked. Of course I am, Kaysen replied. I'm tired of paying rent. $800 every month just goes to waste. We could pay off half the house in 10 years. But there's no money for a down payment, Indigo added sadly. We will, Kaysen said confidently. I'm counting on a nice bonus at the end of the quarter. Plus, Indigo can work extra weekends. Dr. Milner suggested it. I'm tired enough on the weekends, her daughter objected. When do you get to rest? When we buy our own house, then we'll rest, Kaysen said. There was a tense pause. I could see that Indigo didn't like the prospect of working without a day off, but she didn't dare argue with her husband. Kaysen, on the other hand, seemed content to put the conversation to rest. What about your neighbors? I decided to change the subject. They were planning on moving too. The Millers? Indigo perked up. Yeah, they bought a house in a new neighborhood. They moved in last month. They're renovating their apartment for the new tenants. Lucky them, Kaysen said with envy in his voice. Tom's father died and left an inheritance, so they could afford a nice house. It's not very nice to get money that way, I said. Money is money, Kaysen shrugged. The important thing is that they're living in their own house now, not paying rent. Indigo cringed at his bluntness, but didn't say anything. I realized that my son-in-law was the type of person who cared more about the outcome than the means. Not that he was a bad person, but his practicality clearly prevailed over his sensitivity. Mom, have you ever thought about moving? Indigo suddenly asked. You have a big house, and it must be lonely alone. No, I'm comfortable, I answered. The house is familiar. The neighbors are nice. Why change something that suits you? Just think about it, Kaysen interjected. If you sell the house, you can buy a smaller apartment and still have money left over. For a good old age. Again with the hints about my money. Kaysen seemed to be always thinking about how he could get access to my savings. Not directly, of course, but through talk of practicality and prudent planning. I don't plan on moving anywhere yet, I said firmly. Well, suit yourself. Kaysen shrugged again. It's just that at our age, at your age, it's better to plan ahead for things like this. The words at your age sounded particularly unpleasant. It was as if he thought I was a decrepit old woman, incapable of making rational decisions. At 72, I was healthy physically and mentally, But for some reason, Kaysen treated me like a feeble pensioner. We finished the main course, and Indigo brought dessert a store-bought apple pie. Not as good as homemade, but edible. Kaysen praised her choice, though I noticed that he ate a very small piece himself. Apparently, he was really watching his figure. During dessert, the conversation turned to general topics: weather, news, plans for the coming weeks. Kaysen talked about a new advertising campaign at the car dealership, Indigo, about the upcoming advanced training courses. Speaking of courses, the daughter said, I've decided to enroll in the veterinary surgery program. Dr. Milner supports the idea. How much does it cost? Kaysen asked immediately. $2,000 for 6 months, answered Indigo, but then the salary will increase by $300 a month. So it would pay for itself in less than a year, Kaysen calculated. Not a bad investment if they don't downsize. Why do they have to downsize? Wondered the daughter. It doesn't matter, the son-in-law said evasively. The economy's unstable, and a lot of companies are cutting costs. I saw Indigo's face darken. Kaysen was being pessimistic again, finding reasons to worry even in good news. This behavior was depressing to my daughter, robbing her of her enthusiasm and self-confidence. After dessert, Indigo began to clear the table, and Kaysen leaned back in his chair and patted his stomach contentedly. I helped my daughter gather the plates and take them to the sink. The box with my gift was still on the table, waiting patiently. Great dinner, Kaysen said. The meat was as good as ever. The secret was the right marinade and temperature. He was clearly proud of his cooking skills and was waiting for more compliments. I nodded and said something nice about the flavor of the steak. Indigo, meanwhile, was washing dishes, glancing occasionally at my mystery box. The atmosphere in the house was familiar. Kaysen sitting relaxed at the table, Indigo cleaning up the kitchen, me helping with the dishes. Just an ordinary Sunday afternoon of an ordinary family. But in a few minutes, everything would change forever. We moved into the living room, which was cozier than the small kitchen. Kaysen settled into his favorite chair, a massive brown monstrosity that took up a quarter of the room, but which he absolutely refused to get rid of. Indigo sat on the couch with her legs tucked under her, and I settled down next to her. I left the box on the kitchen table, not yet. Outside the window, the rain had almost stopped, but the sky was still gray and gloomy. The living room was warm, with an old heater in the corner that hummed and occasionally clicked. There were scattered magazines on the coffee table, Kaysen's car catalogs, and Indigo's veterinary publications. You know what I'm thinking, Kaysen began, stretching in his chair. It's time for us to do some serious financial planning. We can't live from paycheck to paycheck forever. Indigo nodded, though I noticed a slight shadow running across her face. It was a topic that came up regularly in their house and always caused tension. For Kaysen, planning was a way to control uncertainty, but for Indigo, it was a source of added stress. What exactly are you suggesting? Her daughter asked, trying to hide the tiredness in her voice. Well, first of all, we need to make a clear budget. Kaysen crooked his finger. Write down all the expenses. Analyze what you can save on. Second, open a savings account and set aside a certain amount each month. We've already tried that, Indigo sighed. Remember, last year we opened a special account, but we had to withdraw money from it all the time. We had to repair the car, or go to the doctor, or the refrigerator broke down. That's because we weren't disciplined enough, Kaysen countered. We need to create an emergency fund separate from our basic savings. Experts advise having an amount equal to 3 months' wages. I listened to their conversation and thought about how I knew these problems firsthand. After my divorce from Indigo's father, I lived like this for many years, from paycheck to paycheck, constantly counting every dollar. The difference was that I was able to break that cycle and start saving money, while they couldn't yet. You could feel the pain of repeated failures in their conversation. Every time they made plans, every time something went wrong, the car would break down and goodbye vacation savings, a toothache, and the money for new furniture goes to treatment. It was as if life was deliberately throwing obstacles in their way of financial stability. At our income, 3 months' salary is more than $10,000, Indigo said. Where are we going to get it? Gradually, said Kaysen, with the confidence that always came out of his voice when he made plans. $100 or $200 a month. In 5 years, we'll have the money we need. 5 years, repeated the daughter sadly. What if something happens in that time? What if one of us loses his job or gets seriously ill? That's exactly what the emergency fund is for. Kaysen was clearly annoyed by her pessimism. You can't just think about the bad. You have to plan and act. But Indigo was right in her doubts. At their age, she 45, he 48, there's less and less time for long-term plans. Each year increases the risk of job loss, health problems, unexpected expenses. What is easy at 30 becomes an almost impossible task after 40. I noticed Indigo's hands clasped together. This money talk always upset her. Unlike Kaysen, who loved to make financial plans and seemed energized by the very possibility of calculating everything, my daughter preferred to live for today and not think too far ahead. Maybe because too often plans were ruined by circumstances that could not be foreseen. What if we took out an education loan? She suggested. I'll finish the courses, get a promotion, and the extra $300 a month will help me save faster. A loan is an extra expense. Kaysen shook his head. The interest would eat up half the benefit. It's better to wait until we've saved up our own money. But while I'm saving, courses will go up in price. Indigo objected. Dr. Milner said that next year the cost would go up to $2,500, and in another year it could be $3,000. Then we need to look for other options. Maybe there are cheaper programs or distance learning options, or online courses. They are usually cheaper. I've seen my daughter's hands drop. Kaysen, without realizing it, was discouraging her from developing. He wasn't an evil or greedy man, just overly cautious. He met every initiative Indigo took with a list of possible problems and risks. Instead of support, she received lectures on financial discipline. There was an atmosphere of constant scarcity in this house, not poverty. They didn't starve, had a roof over their heads, could afford simple pleasures. But there was always the question, would there be enough money for repairs, for vacations, for unexpected expenses, for dreams? This uncertainty poisoned the joy of the present and deprived us of faith in the future. You know, I intervened in the conversation, education is always a good investment, even if you have to borrow money. Jason looked at me in surprise. Bryony, you always told Indigo to be careful with money. Cautious, yes, but not cowardly, I said. Sometimes you have to take risks to get the best. Easy for you to say when the risk isn't yours, my brother-in-law said, and there was a coldness in his voice. There was an awkward pause. I realized I'd hurt his feelings with my comment. Kaysen didn't like anyone questioning his decisions, especially in financial matters. To him, it was his manly responsibility, his purview. Criticizing financial plans was taken as questioning his ability to provide for his family. I didn't mean to offend, I said conciliatorily. I just think Indigo has abilities, and it would be a shame not to develop them. Of course he has abilities, Kaysen agreed, softening a little. But we have to act wisely. We can't afford to spend too much. If something goes wrong, we're the ones who have to deal with it. Indigo listened silently to our conversation, but I could see that she was upset. My daughter had always reacted painfully to conflicts, even minor ones. As a child, she hid in her room when I argued with her father, and now she was just as lost in any disagreement between me and Kaysen. She wanted everyone to be happy, no one to argue, the atmosphere to remain peaceful. Let's not talk about this today, she said quietly. This is a family dinner, not a business meeting. You're right, dear. Kaysen got up from his chair and walked to the window. I'm just worried about our future. I want us to be okay. He looked outside, where the puddles reflected the gray sky, and the neighborhood kids played ball on the wet grass. In profile, his face looked tired despite his relatively young age. The constant worry about money had left its mark. The wrinkles around his eyes, the tense line of his mouth, the habit of pressing his lips together at the mention of expenses. We're doing just fine as we are, Indigo countered. We're healthy, we work, we love each other. Isn't that enough? Not enough, Kaysen answered honestly, not turning away from the window. I want more. I want my own house. I want stability. I want to not have to think every month about whether I have enough money for everything I need. I want to allow us little joys once in a while without guilt. There was a sincerity in his voice that touched me. For all his faults, Kaysen really did want a better life for his family. The problem was that he didn't know how to achieve it other than saving and planning. He was a systems man, believed in numbers and charts, but life rarely followed pre-made plans. What if we tried to get an extra job? Indigo suggested. I could moonlight on weekends at another clinic. Doctor? Kramer at the East Street Clinic suggested it. Then we won't see each other at all. Kaysen sighed, turning to her. You already work 6 days a week. When are we going to socialize? When are we just going to be together? But it's temporary. I'll work a year or two extra, save up some money, and then we can relax. Temporary is the most dangerous word in financial planning. Kaysen shook his head. Temporary measures have a way of becoming permanent. You start working on Sundays, then you get used to the extra money. Then there will be new expenses for that money. And so on ad infinitum. I listened to them and thought about the vicious circle they had created for themselves. Kaysen was afraid to take risks, but you can't get out of a financial hole without taking risks. Indigo was willing to sacrifice time and effort, but her husband talked her out of it. It was as if they were standing still, stomping around, discussing the same problems month after month, year after year. But the solution lay just around the corner, in an old box on the kitchen table. $170,000 could break the cycle once and for all. No more talking about where to get the money for a down payment. No more arguing about loans and interest rates. No more agonizing choices between dreams and reality. What if you ask your relatives for help? Kaysen suddenly asked, looking right at me. The question hung in the air, heavy and awkward. Indigo blushed and shook her head quickly. Kaysen, we agreed. We agreed that we'd handle this on our own, he agreed. But maybe we should reconsider that approach. A lot of families help each other. It's normal. I realized this wasn't a spontaneous idea. Kaysen had been thinking about it for a long time, weighing the best way to approach it, and now he's decided to come right out and say it. I guess desperation overpowered pride. What kind of help are we talking about? I asked cautiously. Well, for example, an education loan for Indigo. Kaysen chose his words carefully. Or partial help with a down payment on a house. With repayment and interest, of course. We're not asking for a gift. Kaysen! Indigo was clearly embarrassed by her husband's bluntness. Mom, don't mind him. That's not what he meant. What's the big deal? He objected. It's a normal practice. Banks also give loans at interest. The only difference is that the money stays in the family instead of going into the banker's pockets. There was logic in his argument, but I sensed an undertone. Kaysen saw me as a potential source of funding. Maybe he'd even looked into my financial situation, figured out how much I could lend. The thought was unpleasant, but not surprising. Desperate people will do anything. How much are you considering? I finally asked. Well, 10 or 15,000 to start, Kaysen said, trying to hide the excitement in his voice. That would be enough for the indigo courses and to start saving for a house. We could spread the repayments over a few years, so it wouldn't be too much of a burden. What's the interest rate? I continued to find out the details. I think 3 or 4% a year would be fair, Kaysen said after a short pause. It's less than a bank loan, but more than a deposit. Everything is fair and transparent. Indigo sat red as a cancer and stared at the floor. I could see she was dying of shame. My daughter had been raised to be self-reliant, and asking relatives for money was extremely uncomfortable for her, especially in such an open, almost business-like manner. It's an interesting proposition, I said diplomatically. I'll have to think about it. Sure, Kaysen agreed quickly. We're not forcing anyone. We're just looking at all the options. If it's not a good fit, we'll drop the subject. But I could see the hope in his eyes. He was already imagining how he was going to get the money, how he was going to use it, how he was going to solve his financial problems. This was an opportunity for him to finally break out of the cycle of lack of money, a chance he had waited years for. Mom, Indigo said quietly, don't mind her. We'll really manage on our own, somehow. Why ignore it? Kaysen objected. It's a reasonable offer. Bryony will help us, and we'll make a fair return on the money with interest. Everybody wins. But it creates a dependency, objected the daughter. I don't want to feel indebted to my own mother. Nonsense, Kaysen said. We'd be indebted to the bank if we took out a regular loan. This is a family affair, a family affair. I looked at them and thought about how the dynamics of our relationship would change if I lent them money. Kaysen would feel obligated to be polite and grateful, but at the same time would be burdened by the debt. Indigo will agonize over his dependence on his mother, and I will worry about whether they can pay the money back on time, whether our relationship will deteriorate because of financial obligations. No, a loan is a bad idea. A gift would be much better. A clean, no debt, no interest, no due date. Such a gift will strengthen the family bond, not create additional tension. It's time. I'm up off the couch. You know what? Let's put the loan talk on hold for now. I have something for you that might make a difference. What do you got there? Kaysen asked when I came back from the kitchen with a box in my hands. A gift, I answered, setting the box on the coffee table in front of the couch. For your family. Indigo leaned forward, examining the package. The box looked pretty shabby. Old cardboard, a faded sneaker label, plain brown wrapping paper with no decorations. There was nothing to indicate the value of the contents. Mom, you didn't have to spend, her daughter said warmly. Kaysen leaned back in his chair and took a quick glance at my gift. His face expressed polite interest, but I could see that he wasn't particularly impressed with the look of the box. He rose from his chair and came closer, taking the box in his hands. Something heavy, he remarked, shaking the box. And it rattles a little. Kaysen studied the label on the box, reading the faded writing. Athletic shoes, he read aloud. White running shoes, size 8. He looked at me puzzled, then back at the box. A look of ill-concealed disappointment appeared in his eyes. Bryony, he said with a strained smile, it's a box of old sneakers. What are you doing, giving us shoes? Kaysen, Indigo gently reprimanded him. Don't judge by appearances. Mom must have thought of something interesting. Come on, the son-in-law said, setting the box back on the table. Look at this packaging. It's an old box, cheap paper. What could there possibly be of value in there? He took the box again and shook it against his ear. There's something rustling in there, probably old socks or some other junk. His voice grew more and more dismissive. Kason, Indigo was outraged. How can you talk about Mom's gift like that? A gift? Kason laughed, but the laugh sounded unpleasant. Indigo, honey, open your eyes. It's trash in a shoebox. Your mom apparently decided to get rid of the old stuff and put the responsibility on us. I sat in silence, watching the events unfold. Everything inside was clenching with resentment and humiliation, but I forced myself to stay calm. I wanted to see how far he would go. What kind of cheap gift is that? Kaysen exclaimed, lifting the box above his head. Seriously, Bryony, we're adults. Why would we want a box of old sneakers with some garbage inside? Nah, maybe we should open it up and take a look first, Indigo suggested timidly. Why? Kaysen dismissed the question. It was obvious from the look of the box that it was junk. I'm not going to waste my time going through the junk. He headed for the door, holding the box in his hands. Where are you going? Indigo asked with concern in her voice. I'm going to throw this junk away, Kaysen answered firmly. There's no point in littering the house. But it was a present from Mommy, the daughter protested, jumping up from the couch. A gift? Kaysen stopped in the doorway and turned to us. It's not a gift, it's a mockery. Who gives trash in an old shoebox? Indigo rushed after him, and I slowly got up and followed. My heart was racing, but I knew I had to see this moment through to the end. Outside, Kaysen stopped by a dumpster that stood at the edge of their property. The rain had long since stopped, but the ground was still damp and the air smelled damp. Kaysen, stop! Indigo shouted, running out onto the porch. Don't you dare throw away Mommy's present. Stop defending obvious stupidity. He snapped at her. It's time your mother realized that we're not beggars who can be given any kind of junk. With these words, he threw the box toward the trash can. The box hit the edge of the container and fell to the wet ground next to it. Some of the wrapping paper tore, exposing the time-darkened cardboard. That's it, Kaysen said, shaking off his hands. The trash went where it belonged. Are you crazy? Indigo was furious. How could you throw away a gift without even opening it? What's there to open? Kaysen objected. I'm not blind. An old shoebox. What good could it possibly be? I stood on the doorstep, staring at my box, lying in the dirt. $170,000. 40 years of savings. My love for my daughter and my desire to help her family. All of it was now lying next to the trash can because my son-in-law didn't think the packaging was presentable enough. Pick up that box right now, Indigo demanded. I won't, Kaysen replied stubbornly. Stop indulging your mother's weirdness. It's time she realized that we're not a charity organization for recycling. Then I'll pick it up myself, my daughter said, and took a step toward the container. But I was faster. I climbed down from the porch, walked over to the fallen box, and picked it up. The wrapping paper was partially soaked from the wet earth. The cardboard crumpled in one place. There were traces of dirt on the box. Mom, Indigo ran up to me. I'm sorry, he doesn't know what he's doing. He does, I replied calmly. He showed me what he thought of my gifts. Kaysen stood a few feet away, arms crossed over his chest. His posture was stubborn and unwilling to admit he was wrong. Bryony, if it's so important to you that we look at the contents, let's open it, he said with the look of a man making a big concession. But I apologize in advance for not raving about old socks or anything like that. No need to apologize in advance, I replied, starting to peel off the remains of the wet wrapping paper. Better to wait and see. I took the lid off the box. Inside was absorbent cotton with a folded piece of paper underneath. I removed the absorbent cotton and pulled out this piece of paper. What's this? Indigo asked, looking over my shoulder. I unfolded it and showed them a bank check with the numbers clearly printed on it. $170,000. There was dead silence. Kaysen stared at the check, and I watched his face change. First bewilderment, then gradual understanding, then horror at the realization of what he'd just done. 170,000, he whispered, reading the numbers on the check. Exactly, I confirmed. 40 years I've been saving that money for your family, to buy your house. Indigo pressed her hand to her chest, as if she was having trouble breathing. Mom, is this real? Is this a real check? It is, I answered. I was planning on giving you the money. But first, I wanted to see how you'd feel about a gift that wasn't wrapped in an expensive box. Kaysen stood there, pale as a sheet. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He had just thrown an amount of money in the trash that exceeded his 4-year income. What kind of cheap gift did you say it was? I repeated what he said. A box of old sneakers with trash inside? Bryony, I didn't know. Kaysen finally got it out of him. Of course you didn't know, I agreed, because you didn't bother to open the box and see what was in it. I just judged it by its appearance. Indigo looked at the check, then at her husband, then at me. Her eyes were filled with shock, delight at the sight of such a sum, and shame at Kaysen's behavior. Mom, she said quietly, I'm sorry. He didn't mean to. He just showed his true colors. I interrupted my daughter. And that's a good thing. Now I know what he thinks of me. Kaysen stepped forward, holding out his trembling hands. Bryony, please, let me explain. There's nothing to explain, I replied, folding the check neatly. You've said everything you think about my gifts, about me, about how you think I feel about your family. But I was wrong, Kaysen exclaimed. It's a terrible mistake. Yes, I agreed, tucking the check into my purse. Your mistake. And now you have to live with it. Kaysen stood in front of me, mouth open, like a fish that had been thrown ashore. His face was pale, and there was genuine horror in his eyes. He looked at my purse where I'd put the check, then at me, then back at the purse. He still couldn't quite believe what had happened. $170,000, he repeated in a whisper, as if saying the words out loud would make a difference. Oh my God, Bryony, I didn't know. Of course you didn't know, I replied calmly. You didn't bother to find out. Indigo stood beside her husband, hands pressed to her cheeks. Her eyes darted between us, and I could see the shock at the size of the sum and the shame at Kaysen's behavior struggling in them. It was a mistake, my brother-in-law began to say, taking a hesitant step toward me. A terrible, ridiculous mistake. I had no idea there could be money in the box. What did you think you'd find in there? I asked. Well, I don't know. He stammered for words. Maybe some old things, souvenirs. People don't usually put checks for that kind of money in shoeboxes. People don't usually throw out gifts without looking inside, I countered. Kaysen ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I already knew. He always did that when he was nervous or trying to buy time to think about an argument. Look, Bryony, I know what I did was wrong, but it can be fixed, right? There was a pleading tone to his voice. I'll apologize. We'll talk about it calmly, and you'll forgive me for my stupidity. I stared at him silently. Kaysen took my silence as a willingness to listen to his explanation and continued with increasing enthusiasm. You see, I was upset about our conversation about the loan. I'm uncomfortable asking my relatives for money. It hurts my pride as a man, so I went off on the first excuse I could find. My gift, I clarified. Yes, on your gift, he agreed. And it was wrong. But you realize the state I was in, don't you? Indigo and I are living from paycheck to paycheck, dreaming of a house of our own, and I have to ask my mother-in-law for money. It's humiliating for a man. Indigo nodded, supporting her husband. Mom, Kaysen is really worried about our financial problems. He wants to provide for his family so badly that sometimes it puts pressure on him. Exactly. Kaysen picked up on that. I'm responsible for the family's well being, and when I don't fulfill that role, I start acting out. That's not an excuse, but an explanation. I listened to him and thought about how fake those words sounded. Kaysen was trying to portray himself as a victim of circumstance, a man broken by the weight of responsibility. But I remembered what he'd said about me being a drag on their lives, that he was tired of my company, that my gifts were trash. Kaysen, I said quietly, you talk about male pride and responsibility, but what stopped you from just politely accepting the gift and opening it at home if the wrapping annoyed you so much? Yeah, well, he hesitated again. Must be the tension building up. You know how hard this money thing is for me. No, I don't, I replied. You've been very good at hiding your true feelings until now. You've always been polite and friendly. Because I respect you, Kaysen exclaimed fervently, and I respect you today too. I just snapped in a moment of weakness. People usually show their true colors in a moment of weakness, I said. Kaysen realized that argument wasn't working, so he tried another approach. Okay, let's say I was rude, but my intentions weren't mean. I just wanted you to stop spending money on us when you don't have much. How did you know I didn't have much money? I was surprised. Well, you're a senior citizen, Kaysen said, embarrassed. You live a very modest life, saving money for everything. I thought you were trying to help us at your own expense. Is that why you decided to throw my gift in the trash? I asked. No, that's not why. Kaysen was getting impatient, and his voice was becoming irritated again. I told you it was a moment of weakness, an emotional breakdown. Indigo put her hand on his shoulder, as if trying to reassure him. Honey, don't be nervous. Mommy will understand. Won't she, Mom? She looked at me hopefully. My daughter wanted this unpleasant incident to be resolved peacefully, for everything to return to its former semblance of family harmony. She didn't realize that some things couldn't just be forgotten and forgiven. Indigo, I said softly, tell me honestly, were you surprised by your husband's behavior? Well, the daughter hesitated. Of course I was surprised. He's not usually so rude. Usually or in front of me? I asked. He's always polite when he's with you, Indigo replied, not sure where I was going with this. And when I'm not around? I continued. How does he feel about our meetings? About my phone calls? That I sometimes give you advice? Indigo turned pale. She realized she was walking into a trap. If she told the truth, she'd be admitting that Kaysen was really bad-mouthing me behind my back. If she lied, I could see it in her face. Mom, it doesn't matter. I tried to evade my daughter. The important thing is that we're all together now, and we can talk about this. It's important to me, I insisted. I want to know if Kaysen's behavior today was an accident or a pattern. Kaysen realized that his wife would give him away and decided to take the initiative. Okay, Bryony, since you want full disclosure, I'll tell you the truth. Yes, sometimes I've complained to Indigo that you interfere in our lives too much, but that doesn't mean I don't respect you. Go on, I asked. Well, sometimes I felt like you thought we were children, incapable of making our own decisions. Your advice about budget, work, future plans. You see, it can be painful for a man. Indigo nodded, supporting her husband. Mom, you do give a lot of advice sometimes. We're adults. We can manage on our own. I looked at my daughter and suddenly realized that she wasn't just speaking words of encouragement to Kaysen. Her tone was full of her own complaints about me. They both thought I was intrusive and overprotective. I see, I said. So, the problem isn't just Kaysen, but how you both perceive my concern. It's not a problem. It's a misunderstanding, Kaysen said hastily. We appreciate your concern, but sometimes we just want more independence. And that's why my gifts seem like an attempt to buy your affection? I asked. No, not at all, Kaysen protested. We've always been grateful for your gifts. Today, I wasn't thinking. Didn't think, or did you think too hard? I parried. Kaysen realized he'd fallen into another trap. If he said he hadn't thought, it would characterize him as impulsive and irresponsible. If he said he had, it would mean he meant to hurt my feelings. Brioni, he said tiredly, I've already apologized and explained my behavior. What else do you want me to say? Nothing, I replied. I've heard enough. Indigo took a step forward. Mom, we can start fresh. Kaysen realized his mistake, and I also realized that sometimes we were ungrateful. Let's forget this incident and get back to the fact that you wanted to give us that money. I did, I emphasized. Past tense. But you can change your mind, Kaysen said hopefully. People have the right to make mistakes. Even I'm entitled to make mistakes. Of course you do, I agreed. And I have the right to make conclusions. What conclusions? Indigo asked. That, my dear, you'll find out later, I answered. Right now, I want to talk to you alone. Kaysen frowned. Why alone? We're a family. We can talk about things together. Because you're family and I'm not, I replied, as you made clear today. I didn't say that, Kaysen countered. Not in words, but in deeds, I clarified. And deeds, as you know, are more eloquent than words. Kaysen looked at his wife for support. Indigo hesitated. She obviously didn't want to be alone with me for a serious conversation, but she didn't dare to oppose me outright. Mom, can't we talk some other time? She asked. We're all tired of emotions. It's better to let things settle down. No, you can't, I said firmly. Some conversations can't be put off. They tend to get stale. Kaysen realized that his presence was just getting in the way, and he reluctantly headed toward the house. Okay, talk, but Indigo, remember, we're a team. No matter what your mother says, remember that. Of course, honey, my daughter nodded, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Kaysen disappeared into the house, and we stood by the trash can, where the scraps of wrapping paper from my gift were still lying around. Symbolic, I thought. It was here, next to the trash, that our crucial conversation would take place. We were left standing outside the house alone, me and Indigo. My daughter nervously rubbed the edge of her t-shirt and avoided looking me in the eye. The air was fresh after the rain, but the atmosphere between us grew more and more tense with each second of silence. Mom, Indigo finally spoke, I understand that you're upset. It really wasn't nice what Kaysen did, but sometimes people do stupid things when they're nervous. I looked at my daughter in silence. There was a sense of rote memorization in her words, as if she'd rehearsed this speech while Kaysen was going into the house. Indigo had always been the peacemaker in the family first, between me and her father, now between me and my husband. Do you think he was just nervous? I asked. Yes, she nodded. We were discussing the loan, and he felt uncomfortable, so he snapped. Men do that sometimes. It's hard for them to show weakness. What does he say about me when I'm not here? I asked him a direct question. Indigo blushed and looked away. Mom, why do you ask that? It's not important. It's important to me. Answer me honestly. Her daughter was silent for a moment, clearly struggling with herself. Then she sighed. Sometimes he complains that you call too often, or that you give a lot of advice we don't ask for. Go on. Well, he says you treat us like children, Indigo continued reluctantly, that you're always trying to control our lives. And you agree with him? Indigo was quiet again, but longer this time. I could see her weighing her words, trying to find a wording that wouldn't offend me or my husband. Mom, you really do worry about us too much sometimes, she said finally. You call almost every day, wondering about every little thing in our lives, asking what we had for dinner, how much we spent at the store, what our plans are for the weekend. That's called motherly concern, I objected. I know, my daughter agreed hastily, and we appreciate it. Sometimes you just want to feel like adults, independent people. I listened to her and realized that I was discovering the truth that they had both been hiding for years. My calls annoyed them. My advice seemed intrusive. My concern felt like an attempt at control. And Sunday dinners? I asked. How does Kason feel about them? He, Indigo hesitated. He never said he didn't like them, but he did say something. Sometimes he complained that he was tired after work and wanted a quiet weekend, her daughter admitted. But he understands that it's important to me. Understands or tolerates. What's the difference? Indigo flared up. The main thing is that he comes, talks to you, tries to be polite. Yes, today I saw how he tries, I said dryly. Mom, that's enough. My daughter was starting to lose her patience. He apologized, explained that it was a mistake. What else do you want? I need honesty, I replied. And I got it. Now I know what you both think of me. We don't think badly of you, Indigo protested. We love you. We appreciate your care. It's just that sometimes that care can be excessive. Excessive, I repeated. I see. We didn't talk for a moment. Indigo clearly sensed that the conversation wasn't going where she wanted it to go. She had hoped to smooth things over, to find a compromise, to restore some semblance of harmony. But instead, it only deepened the gulf between us. Mom, she tried again, let's just forget about today's incident. Kason was wrong. He realizes that. You wanted to give us an incredible gift, and we're very touched by your generosity. I wanted to, I emphasized. Past tense. But you can still change your mind, my daughter said hopefully. We'll be very grateful. $170,000 is the solution to all our problems. Really? I was surprised. So it's only about money? No, it's more than that. Indigo objected hastily. It was also because you wanted to help us, to make our lives better. That's very touching of you. But excessive, I reminded her of what she had said. That's not what I meant, she said, embarrassed. Gifts are different. It's an expression of love, not an attempt at control. What's the difference? Well, gifts are given from the heart, without expecting anything in return. And the advice and the phone calls. Sometimes it feels like you expect us to behave in a certain way. Indigo didn't realize what she'd just said. She had just admitted that she perceived my concern as an attempt at manipulation and gifts as a way to buy their affection. So you're willing to accept a check for $170,000, but not my calls and advice? I clarified. Mom, you're twisting things around, my daughter said indignantly. That's not what I wanted to say. And what did you want to say? That we are adults and have the right to our own opinions, Indigo answered with a challenge in her voice. That your concern can sometimes be intrusive, but we love you anyway. And that's why you're willing to put up with my obsession for money? What does money have to do with it? My daughter got angry. It's not about money. It's about family relations. Then why did you start talking about how a check would solve all your problems? I countered. Indigo realized that she had fallen into the trap of her own words again. She wanted to eat the fish and climb the tree, to get my money, but at the same time to retain the right to criticize my behavior. Mom, you're confusing me on purpose, she said resentfully. You're taking things out of context and picking on words. I'm just trying to figure out how you really feel about me, I explained, and gradually the picture is becoming clearer. What picture? My daughter asked warily. The picture of your true feelings. Kaysen thinks I'm a clingy old woman who's interfering with your life. You agree with him, but you're willing to tolerate my obsession for material gain. That's not true, Indigo exclaimed. You're distorting everything. Then explain to me how it really is, I asked. My daughter was silent for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Then she took a deep breath. Mom, we really love you, but we also love our independence. Sometimes your care seems excessive to us, but we realize that this is a manifestation of your love. Go on. Kaysen is a good person. He just can be abrupt sometimes. Today, he was out of line, and that's bad. But that doesn't take away from all of his good qualities. Like what? I asked. He takes care of his family, works hard, loves me. Indigo began to list. He's a faithful husband and a reliable partner. Who throws your mother's gifts in the garbage? I added. That was a mistake, exclaimed the daughter. One single mistake in all the years. What if it wasn't a mistake, but a manifestation of his true attitude toward me? No, Mom, you're wrong. Kaysen was just tired of the financial problems, so he snapped. I looked at my daughter and saw that she truly believed what she was saying. Indigo really thought her husband's behavior was an unfortunate accident, not a natural result of his attitude toward me. Indigo, I said softly, tell me honestly, if you had to choose between me and Kaysen, who would you choose? My daughter turned pale. Mom, that's not a fair question. Why would I choose? You're both important to me. But if I had to, I wouldn't have to, Indigo said stubbornly. I won't let myself be put to that choice. But you've already made a choice, I pointed out, today, when you justified your husband's behavior. I wasn't justifying. I was explaining, my daughter objected. It's not the same thing. For me, it's the same thing, I replied. We were silent again. I could feel the estrangement growing between us. Every word of this conversation was distancing us from each other. And the saddest part was that I could see that Indigo didn't realize it. She was still hoping to smooth things over. Mom, she tried again, let's not fight. Family is more important than any misunderstanding. Family, I repeated. Am I part of your family? Of course you are, exclaimed her daughter. You're my mother, so how can you not be part of the family? Does Kaysen think so? Well, he's getting used to it, Indigo said uncertainly. Not everyone gets along right away. 8 years is a long time to get used to it, I said. Men in general have a harder time getting along with their wife's relatives, I tried to explain. It's normal. Is it normal to throw your mother-in-law's gifts in the trash? No, it's not normal, Indigo agreed. But that doesn't mean he's a bad person. What does it mean? That he made a mistake that can be forgiven and forgotten. I realized that my daughter doesn't see and doesn't want to see the depth of the problem. To her, today's incident is an unfortunate accident that can be glossed over for the sake of family peace. She doesn't understand that some actions characterize a person completely. Indigo, I said at last, I won't ask you to choose between me and your husband. You've already chosen. What do you mean? My daughter became alarmed. That you are ready to defend him, justify his actions, and turn a blind eye to his attitude towards me. I'm not defending him. You're just taking his side, I finished. And that's your right. He's your husband. I get it. Mom, you make it sound like we're enemies, Indigo said upset. But we're not. We're not enemies, I agreed. Just people with different priorities. What priorities? Your priority is your husband and your family world. I prioritized your happiness, but apparently our ideas of what makes you happy don't match. Indigo looked at me with growing concern. She was beginning to realize that this conversation could drastically change our relationship. Mom, what are you trying to say? She asked quietly. That it's time for me to stop interfering in your adult, independent life, I replied. You asked for it. My daughter realized that her words had turned against herself. By criticizing my obsession, she had given me reasons to change our relationship dramatically. That's not what I meant, she said weakly. What did you mean? That, that we could find a balance between your concern and our autonomy. And what kind of balance is that? I asked. I give you money and you put up with my calls? No, Indigo exclaimed. It's not about money. What is it about? It's about family relations, about love, about understanding each other. Then why did you start talking about how a check would solve all your problems in the first place? The daughter realized she'd fallen into another trap. All her attempts to smooth things over were only making things worse. Mom, let's just go home and talk quietly, she suggested desperately. Kaysen will apologize properly, we'll talk about it, and you'll realize that we really love you. Thank you, I replied. But I already understood. I got into my car and drove slowly out of their street without looking back. Indigo's figure flashed in the rearview mirror, standing in the road, but I didn't let myself stop or slow down. My hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel, not from fear or nervousness, but from that strange relief that comes after making an important decision. The city slowly floated by outside the windows, the familiar streets I'd been driving on for decades, the houses of my neighbors, the stores where I'd shopped. But today it seemed different, as if I was looking at Tuskegee through the eyes of a stranger. Maybe because for the first time in years, I wasn't going home, but on urgent business that couldn't wait. Thatcher Grimsby's office was located downtown in an old two-story red brick building. I'd known the man for 20 years. He'd handled all my legal affairs since he'd helped me finalize my divorce from Indigo's father. Thatcher was a man of advanced years, but a sharp mind and an impeccable reputation. More importantly, he worked Saturdays for special urgent cases. Parking outside the building, I pulled out my cell phone and dialed his number. After the third ring, a familiar, husky voice came through. Grimsby office speaking. Thatcher, this is Bryony Coleman. I need your help today. It's very urgent. Bryony, the lawyer was surprised. What's wrong? You usually schedule meetings in advance. There have been circumstances that require immediate changes to my documents, I explained. Can you see me now? Sure. I'm just working on the Patterson case. Come on up to the office. The door's open. I climbed the creaky wooden stairs to the second floor. Thatcher's office looked the same as it had 20 years ago. A solid oak desk, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather armchairs darkened by time. Even the smell was the same, a mixture of old leather, tobacco, and that distinctive aroma of legal documents. Thatcher rose from his desk to greet me. In his 75 years, he remained an agile and energetic man, although gray hair and wrinkles gave away his age. His gold-rimmed glasses made him look like the wise mentor he was to many Tuskegeans. Bryony, sit down. He pointed to the chair across from his desk. Tell me what you are so excited about. I settled into the familiar chair and placed my purse on my lap. Inside was a check for $170,000, the same check that a few hours ago was going to make a difference in my daughter's life. Thatcher, I need to change my will and dispose of a large sum of money, I began. Today, there have been events that have radically changed my plans. What events? The lawyer took a notebook and a pen out of the desk drawer. And how much money are we talking about? I told him everything. About 40 years of savings, about the plan to give the money to my daughter, about Kaysen's reaction and the conversation with Indigo. Thatcher listened attentively, occasionally making notes, but not interrupting. He knew how to listen, a rare quality in this age of constant hurry. I see, he said when I had finished my story. The situation is really unpleasant. What do you want to do with the money? I want it to go to charity, I said firmly, to help those who really need it. And the will? That needs to be changed too. Exclude Indigo from the main estate. Thatcher took off his glasses and wiped them with his handkerchief, his usual gesture when he was thinking about difficult issues. Bryony, I must warn you, these decisions are best not made on emotion. Maybe we should wait a week or two, let things settle down. No, I shook my head. I thought about it all the way here. It's a thoughtful decision. Good. Then let's discuss the details. Where exactly do you want the $170,000 to go? I've been thinking. I had thought about a lot of things in the half hour I'd been driving here, but I hadn't chosen a specific charity. What would you recommend? I asked. There are several options. Thatcher opened one of the drawers and pulled out some brochures. A local shelter for homeless animals, a fund to help low-income families, a scholarship program for gifted children from single-parent families. The last option caught my eye. Tell me about the scholarship program. It's a local initiative that the school district oversees, the lawyer explained. They help children from single-parent families get a college education. The funds go toward tuition, books, and dormitory fees. How many kids can you educate on $170,000? With the average cost of a community college education, about 10 to 12 people, full tuition. I loved the idea. The money I was saving for my own daughter's education would help educate kids who really needed it. Those who parents can't or won't help will get a chance to change their lives. That's great, I said. Make a donation to the scholarship program. Thatcher made a note in his notebook. And now for the will. Your current will leaves all of your assets, house, savings, personal belongings, to Indigo. What exactly do you want to change? I want to bequeath the house and the rest of my savings to the same scholarship program, I replied after a short thought. Let them sell the house and use the money to help students. What about personal belongings? You can leave them to Indigo. Her family photos, her mother's jewelry, her books. Let her have them. I see. What if Indigo tries to contest the will? Technically, she has every reason to expect an inheritance. What would she have to do that? Make the will as detailed as possible. Give reasons for your decisions. Have it witnessed by 2 witnesses. And it is desirable to attach a letter explaining your motives. Thatcher got up from the table and went to the safe in the corner of the office. After twisting the lock combination, he pulled out several folders from there and brought them to the desk. Here are the forms for making a charitable donation. He spread the documents out in front of me. And these are the forms for the new will. It'll take us about an hour to get it right. The next hour passed in concentrated work. Thatcher dictated the wording. I made edits. We discussed legal details. The lawyer worked quickly and professionally, the experience of decades of practice. The charitable donation was formalized first. $170,000 went to the Tuskegee School District with the condition that it be used exclusively for the scholarship program. Thatcher called the bank and arranged for the funds to be transferred on Monday. There was no banking on Saturday. The new will turned out to be more detailed than the previous one. It clearly stated that the house and savings balances were for the scholarship program, and personal belongings were for the daughter. In a separate paragraph, I asked for a statement that this decision was made in good judgment and not out of emotion. Now you need a letter explaining your motives, Thatcher said, handing me a blank sheet of paper. Write in your own words why you made this decision. I took the pen and thought, how can I explain to my daughter that her choice has consequences, that a mother's love is not unlimited, that you can't simultaneously criticize a person for being intrusive and expect them to be generous? Dear Indigo, I began to write, the decision to change my will has not come easily to me, but it is deliberate and final. Today's events have shown me that you have chosen your husband over your mother. That's your right, and I respect that. But I also have the right to choose who I leave the fruits of my labor to. I wrote slowly, choosing my words carefully. I wanted to explain my feelings to my daughter, but not sound hurt or vindictive. The money I've been saving for your family will now help other children get an education. Perhaps there will be some among them who will be grateful for the help, rather than complain about the benefactor's overprotection. The house will also go to charity. You're right. At my age, it's time to consider moving to a smaller apartment. The difference in price will help a few more students. Your family heirlooms, photos, my grandmother's jewelry, my books, stay with you. It's a link to the past that can't be sold or given to strangers. I hope when the emotions settle, you will understand my motives. I don't want to punish you. I want to help those who truly need and would appreciate the support. Love, Mom. I reread the letter and signed it. Thatcher read the text and nodded. Well written. No accusations, no threats, just explaining your position. And now what? Now you need witnesses. I have 2 employees who can certify signatures. They'll be here now. A few minutes later, 2 people entered the office. An elderly secretary, Mrs. Hanks, and a young paralegal, James. They read the will, confirmed that I was of sound mind and signing the documents voluntarily, and affixed their signatures. That's it, Thatcher said, putting the documents in a folder. The will takes effect immediately. 1 copy stays with me. 1 copy will be given to you. Does Indigo have to be notified somehow? Not necessarily. The will only become known to the heirs after your death. But if you want to inform your daughter of your decisions, that's your right. I took my copy of the will and the letter. The heaviness in my heart that had been weighing me down all the way here gradually receded. I had done what I thought was right. My conscience was clear now. Thank you, Thatcher, I said, rising from my chair. How much do I owe you? For an old client, for free, smiled the lawyer. But promise me not to make hasty decisions in the future. Family conflicts can be solved in less drastic ways. This is not a hasty decision, I objected. It's the result of years of observation. Today, the full picture just became visible. Thatcher walked me to the door. Take care of yourself, Bryony. And think about giving Indigo another chance. She got all the chances she deserved, I said, and now other children will get them. As I walked down the stairs, I felt strangely relieved. For the first time in years, I had made a decision guided not by maternal duty, but by my own principles. It was liberating and frightening at the same time. Outside, the sun was already setting, coloring the sky orange and pink. I got in my car and pulled out my cell phone. I needed to call Indigo and inform her of my decisions. Tomorrow promised to be a challenging day. I called Indigo immediately while sitting in the car outside Thatcher's office. The phone answered after the first beep. My daughter must have been expecting my call. Mom? I could hear anxiety and hope in her voice at the same time. I want to meet you both tonight, I said without preamble. I have some important information for you. Of course, Indigo agreed hastily. Come to our place. Kaysen wants to talk to you too. He's really worried about what happened. I'll be there in half an hour. I'll be there in half an hour. I hung up the phone and started the engine. The drive back seemed shorter, probably because I was looking forward to certainty instead of agonizing deliberation. The decisions were made, the paperwork was done, and the only thing left to do was to put a final stop to the story. I parked outside their house and took an envelope from my purse with a copy of the will and a letter for Indigo. I didn't want to go inside because I had too many unpleasant memories from today. Better to talk outside, on neutral ground. The door opened before I reached the porch. Kaysen stepped out, and I noticed right away that he looked completely different. All his usual confidence was gone. His shoulders slumped, guilt and despair in his eyes. He must have realized the extent of his mistake in the past few hours. Bryony, he began before he reached me, I must apologize. What I did today was unforgivable. You don't need to apologize, I stopped him. You showed your true attitude toward me. You should even be thankful for that. Kaysen stopped a few feet away from me, as if afraid to come any closer. Indigo appeared in the doorway, but was in no hurry to go outside either. I realize I was wrong, my brother-in-law continued. I let my emotions get the better of me. It does not characterize me on the best side. What is your best characterization? I asked. The question caught him off guard. Kaysen opened his mouth, but couldn't answer right away. Well, I'm a hard worker. I take care of my family. I love Indigo, he began uncertainly. And throwing her mother's gifts in the trash, I added. That was a mistake, he exclaimed. One single mistake, which explains a lot, I replied calmly. Indigo finally decided to leave the house. She walked over to her husband and took him under her arm, a gesture of support that did not go unnoticed. Mom, she said quietly, we're ready to discuss this calmly. Kaysen realized his guilt, and I realized that sometimes we really are ungrateful. Ungrateful, I repeated. Interesting word. So you thought I was a benefactor after all? Of course we did, Kaysen answered hastily. You've always helped us, supported us, been there for us in times of need. And in doing so, you've gotten in the way of your life. I reminded him of what he'd said this morning. That's not what I meant, my son-in-law protested. They were words spoken in a fit of anger. Words spoken in anger are usually the most truthful, I said. Kaysen realized he'd fallen into another trap. Whatever he was saying now, his words this morning had completely discredited any excuse. Bryony, tell me what I need to do to make you forgive me, he asked desperately. I would do anything. Anything? I asked again. Yes, anything. Just get us back in your good graces. I looked at both of them, at Kaysen with his feigned remorse, and at Indigo with her hope for reconciliation. They still didn't realize that some things couldn't be undone with pretty words. All right, I said. Then listen carefully. I took an envelope out of my purse and held it out to Indigo. What is it? My daughter asked. Information about my money and property, I answered. Indigo opened the envelope with shaky hands and took out the documents. First, she read the letter, then a copy of the will. Her face gradually turned pale. Mom, she whispered, what does this mean? It means that $170,000 went to a scholarship fund for children from single-parent families, I explained calmly. And the house will also go to charity after I die. Kaysen snatched the papers out of my wife's hands and ran his eyes over them, his face contorted with horror. You can't do this, he exclaimed. That money was meant for us. It was meant for us, I emphasized, until you threw it in the trash. But you can get it back. He was grasping at straws. Cancel the donation, change the will. You could, I agreed, but I won't do it. Why not? Kaysen was on the verge of a breakdown. Because we apologized. We realized our mistakes. You realized you lost money? I corrected him. That's not the same as realizing mistakes. Indigo stared at the will in silence. Her eyes were filled with shock and panic. Mom, she said at last, but I'm your daughter, the only daughter. Yes, I agreed, and I'm leaving you all the family heirlooms photos, Grandma's jewelry, books, things money can't buy. And the house? Asked my daughter in a weak voice. The house will go to those who are grateful for the help, I said. Kaysen's face suddenly changed. All attempts to sound remorseful were gone, replaced by real anger. So you've decided to punish us, he said bitterly, to deprive us of everything for one mistake. I'm not punishing anyone, I countered. I'm just redistributing my resources to those who will appreciate them. And we didn't? Kaysen blurted out. We've put up with your whims for 8 years, listened to your endless advice, invited you to family dinners. Isn't that gratitude? Patience, I repeated. Key word. You didn't enjoy my company. You tolerated it. So what? My son-in-law finally dropped the mask. Is it necessary to enjoy socializing with elderly relatives? The main thing is that we fulfilled our family obligations. We did, I agreed. And now I'm fulfilling my obligations to those who really need help. Indigo suddenly cried, silently, hopelessly. She realized that it was over, that my decision was final. Mom, she sobbed, can you do this to your own daughter? Could you protect your own mother when your husband was abusing her? I parried. He wasn't abusing her, protested the daughter. He just showed his true colors, I finished, and you took his side, because he's my husband. And who am I? I asked. Indigo was silent. She couldn't answer that simple question because the answer would be too painful. You have made your choice, I continued. Now you have to live with the consequences. But we can make it right, Kaysen exclaimed desperately. I'll treat you with respect. Indigo will call every day. Out of gratitude for the money? I clarified. No, out of love, he declared. There's a different name for love that depends on money, I said. Kaysen realized that all his arguments were missing the point. I was as relentless as a rock that waves crash against. You're a cruel, selfish old woman, he finally exploded. All your life you've been saving money, and now you're giving it to other people's children out of revenge. Not out of revenge, I corrected him, out of a desire to help those who deserve help. And we don't? Not according to today. Indigo stopped crying and looked up at me, her eyes red with tears. So it's over between us? You ended it when you chose his side? I replied. I'm just taking your decision to heart. But I'm your daughter. Was. Now you're Kaysen's wife who thinks mothering is an imposition. I turned around and headed for the car. Behind me, I could hear Kaysen yelling something and Indigo crying again. But it didn't bother me anymore. The time for tears and regret was over. Bryony, my son-in-law called out to me. You're going to regret this decision. I stopped and turned around. No, I said calmly. I'll regret that I didn't make it sooner. I got in the car and started the engine. I took one last look at the house where I'd once hoped to find a family, but found only disappointment. Indigo and Kaysen stood in the driveway, holding hands, a team just like he'd said. A team I wasn't a part of. Nothing. Now I'll have a different team, kids who will get an education because of my money. Maybe they'll turn out to be more grateful than my own daughter. I drove slowly away from the house and never looked back. I had a new life ahead of me. No obligations to ungrateful relatives, no weekly visits to those who only tolerated me. A life for myself, which I deserved after 40 years of dedication. The drive home seemed short. I drove and thought about the fact that tomorrow I would start looking for a small apartment downtown. The house is really too big for one person, and the neighbors will be happy to know that their plot will be bought by people who can improve it. And in a few years, when my will comes into effect, somewhere in this city, there will be doctors, teachers, engineers who will be able to get an education thanks to a woman they will never know. But who will turn out to be a better mother to them than she was to her own daughter? It was justice at its purest, and I was prepared to live with that decision for the rest of my life.